Commutifi presents Between the Lines with Andy Keaton. Each week, we explore the challenging issues transportation demand management professionals face on their journey to transition commuters from driving alone to more sustainable, shared, and active commuting habits. Be sure to subscribe to hear next week's episode and check out our exclusive commuter playlists on Spotify. This is Between the Lines with Andy Keaton.
Everyone, thanks for being on board with us today. This episode, we're talking with Rob Henry. Rob is the Public Policy Chair for the Association for Commuter Transportation, which is the premier TDM organization in the United States. Rob's also the founder, CEO, and president of the 82 Alliance, a not-for-profit mobility think tank that focuses on reimagining how we move our cities, towns, and people. And he's the CEO of Communities in Motion, the executive director of the GVF TMA, and the immediate past president of ACT. Rob's an expert in transportation demand management, or TDM, and he has presented on TDM projects throughout the United States. And I think it goes without question here. We're really excited to have Rob on today to talk a bit about TDM and more specifically why the More Through TDM Act is going to save the planet. Rob, thanks for being on.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I'm just going to start off here. I think some listeners probably have heard of the More Through TDM Act. Maybe some haven't. Can you just kind of high level talk to me a bit about what the More Through TDM Act is? Maybe even generally, TDM in general. Why is all of this important to us?
Sure. So I think during the pandemic, you got to see how everybody used TDM. Working from home, riding their bike, walking. Essential workers took transit. So it was a great, not a great example, but an example can help. Wrong terminology. Horrible time, but you got to see what it can do when we have a normal kind of time. So the More Through TDM Act, basically what we found out from talking to colleagues in Washington was, there's all these wonderful TDM programs across the U.S., but they don't have a formal definition for it. So it kind of gets siloed in all different places and misunderstood. And so we worked with them and they said, if you come up with a formal definition, that'll help big time. So that's what we did. So we came up with a definition. We just introduced the act. It's got a lot of money attached to it. There's research as part of it, which is kind of how USDOT makes decisions sometimes, is they need data and research to back that up.
Sure.
There's committees that'll be formed inside of it.
Interesting. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot here actually, and that was a really good, I think, overview of this. But let's start with the first thing you talked about. So for all our listeners here, I'm on the public policy committee here that Rob is the chair of. So been involved with kind of reading through the legislation and talking with members of Congress myself. I think it's really interesting. I'm really excited about it. And one of those things, the first thing you talked about is defining TDM. So this is really finally legitimizing TDM on the federal level. It's kind of giving us an understanding of what it actually is, so that then programs can be formed, funding can be pushed to the right things. So what is the importance of defining terms like TDM? Defining what a TDM strategy looks like, or even what a TMA looks like. What is the importance of doing that?
So there's the federal code where they define all the transportation terms. So not being in there means that it's up to however it's interpreted. So each state, each person decides what their definition is. And so while state A can say, hey, this is great, we're doing TDM, we fund this, state B will say, no, that's not TDM under our interpretation. And this kind of chaotic, fragmented process across the country. So when we would approach USDOT about certain ideas or concepts, they'd say, that's great, we support it, but we can't fund it because it doesn't fit into our process. So we need that definition. So this would create a formal definition for TDM that would then, our hope is then open up additional funding and kind of streamline how to do that across the US. And it makes it easier for people that are trying to do projects, so that there's, kind of an apples to apples comparison when you're going in. You don't have to recreate it every single time. So that's a game changer. If we get the definition into that federal code, that opens up TDM to all kinds of possibilities.
And this is the funny thing, for people not in kind of the public policy space, and in the particularly if you're in kind of the private space, you don't even touch this stuff on a normal basis.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily think, oh, there's not a definition. Why just defining it's important? But I think you put it perfectly, Rob. It is going to help all of us in this field, whether we're new to TDM and trying to figure out what it is. We have a definition now, or if we've been doing it forever, we're in a city, we're in a state that's been doing it well. Finally, now we can make sure that we're doing the same thing that everyone else is doing, that the federal government understands what we're doing. And then the nice thing here, I think this is what everyone's going to be excited about, funneling more money into these programs, and making sure they actually go to the TDM programs that we all care about. So let's just jump to that. Can you tell me a bit more about what is the funding? What does that look like? What kind of funding are we looking for from this
So
bill?
in our history, at least with ACT and TDM, we've never really asked for any money for our programs. And so we've done a lot of this kind of bottom up approach where we go to cities and towns and MPOs and DOTs and ask, and then we hit all kinds of walls and barriers. So what we've decided with ACT is to ask for a 5-year grant program through US DOT. So you would have to follow the definition, but it'd be $1.25 billion. So we'll go from zero dedicated money at the federal level to all of a sudden 1.25 billion. And we feel that that'll be enough time to say, look at all these great projects that are able to be achieved through this funding. And that should hopefully lead to additional funding, new creative funding over time.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, $1.25 billion. I mean, that's a big jump up from zero. And I know from my own work as well that it's hard. It's hard right now to get the funding for the TDM programs that you want. Like you said, it doesn't fit quite into the right kind of funding sources that currently exist. So being able to push new money into this particular space is huge. And I think it's gonna benefit us a lot. Can you talk to me a bit about what? I mean, I think at the beginning you kind of talked about TDM, but for people who maybe TDM is a little bit new to them, or just trying to figure out exactly if their programs fit in this, what's an example of a program that maybe wouldn't have been funded before that could now be funded, or kind of programs that this is really targeted for this funding?
Basically, an example would be you want to do a behavior change project, and you go in and the MPO says that's not an eligible funding strategy because we can't figure out how to fund that. Federal Highway says no. Well, if no one knows what the alternatives are, how do you expect them to be aware of what options are out there? So it's that kind of chicken and egg sometimes. So
Sure.
and that provides equity too, because it's that not one size fits all approach. So, there are communities that have great public transit and there's communities that don't have great public transit. So maybe bikes work or trails work or carpool or vanpool. It's trying to figure out what works so that people have an option versus just driving their car alone and not knowing. And that's one of the things we often find and hear. I have no idea how to go about this process. How do I find this information? It's too overwhelming. A transit map is too confusing for me. I don't understand how to pay for an e-bike. I don't understand. There's 2 different apps. And so it's just working through. And that's kind of that behavior change science, which isn't a hard, fast physical infrastructure project, is what, we think that will be something that would be eligible and much easier to do under this legislation.
Sure. So yeah, our listeners who've been kind of listening since the first week here, we talked with Joey Sherlock about behavioral TDM and this exact idea about how we can um, use behavioral science, behavioral economics, human centered design, and create programs and projects that can actually get people out of their cars. And so if you're thinking, well, that sounds great, but how am I actually going to do that? Well, here's your answer. The more through TDM Act, hopefully there'll actually be some money that can actually push you to or provide that option for you to use it. We're talking education for commuters, we're talking information, and just actually putting in place those programs that create that behavior change, which is really important. Obviously, I think we all know that it's really important. That's the whole goal here, trying to get people out of their
Mhm.
cars. And I think the More Through TDM Act is a good, huge step in that direction to do that. So is this funding for cities? Is it for TMAs? Who can leverage this funding? How is that? We're kind of getting into the weeds a bit here, but I
Sure.
think it might be useful. Uh, who which of our listeners are actually going to be able to take advantage of this?
So that's kind of the process. So in order to have, I guess, the federal government understand how to process, we had to mirror something. So there's the current grant program called Congestion Mitigation Air Quality, which is CMAQ, which a lot of
Hmm.
projects are funded, but sometimes very challengingly under that. But not every area of the country is eligible for CMAQ money. So it basically would be a process where they would create a committee at USDOT that would figure out how to tell the states that they're going to spend this money. And then the states have to create a committee to then tell their local MPOs and RPOs how to spend this money. And then they'll be able to put out the applications. And then as long as I imagine what they would do is like a call for the programs, and people would submit ideas and concepts,
Sure.
and it'll be a little different. And that's what we're trying to formalize at that process, so it's consistent across the U.S. and not state A does this, state B does this, and kind of create kind of that Wild West, and we don't know what's getting funded.
Yeah, that's I think that's the theme throughout this whole entire thing is uh, just creating that consistency. TDM is this
Mm-hmm.
new field. I mean, relatively new, particularly in transportation, and trying to get it off the ground nationwide requires us to define what it means. Requires us to have a standard set of procedures in place to get this funding. No matter which state you're in, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's obviously very useful. Um, the other thing that really stuck out to me when
Mm-hmm.
I was looking through this, I think sounds really interesting, um, is the idea of putting into place some new programs, not just funding, but this is putting together. You talked about kind of this national advisory committee, but also state advisory committees and a new university transportation center for research. What is the benefit there? And we don't have to talk about the specifics of how that actually gets put together, unless you want to. But I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's more what is the benefit there? Why is it important to us that these things are now going to be put in place?
So right now we don't have any. There's research done, but it's kind of a little fragmented. It's University A may do some universities, so it's we don't have that clearly defined. We're going to say this is great TDM, this is great research. We're going to study those programs to make sure that they were effective and the dollars were actually there was a return on that investment. So, and that's a lot of times what we'll find. So you submit a grant, either it's a DOT or an MPO, and they'll say, well, where's the data to back this up that's validated by
Yeah.
USDOT? And we're in that constant push pull of like, well, there's not any real, we can't pull any research. We can tell you and show you examples, but it's not, say, certified by USDOT. There is some. So the goal would be to broaden that and open that up and really further enhance that research opportunity. And then those state kind of agencies and the federal agency would kind of be the arbitrary bodies to make sure that this is going on, that they're saying like, hey, this has to happen in order to get this funding. You need to make sure you're checking these boxes, because what we also want to do with this is there's a lot of bad examples of TDM across the United States.
Yep.
So for
Sure.
example, I had a community that I was working with, and they thought TDM was throughput. So how many cars can we get through intersections was TDM.
Ah.
And we're like, that's not TDM. They're still in their car. We want them out of their car. You're pushing more
Yep.
cars through it. That doesn't really accomplish anything for us. Maybe you lower emissions a little bit, but really you're not changing any habits or anything else. So it's that's where we have to get that standard in, and we need the research to show this is bad. This is the things we should not be doing, and here are the great things that we can be doing, and kind of do that. But we need the seed money, so it's kind of chicken and egg. We need the seed money in order to have programs. We need the research to complement it, and then they all kind of work together.
Yeah, and that's maybe the real beauty behind this More Through TDM Act is that it does all of it. You got
Mm-hmm.
the money, you got the university research center, and you've got the system and infrastructure in place to make sure people are doing the right programs. So we're not using our funding on on throughput, but obviously maybe still an important thing, but not in the TDM space. We can make sure that the funding's going the right way. So once again, getting back to that consistency, making sure that we're really pushing the right TDM programs. People are using this funding to do programs that cause this beneficial behavior change, get people out of cars, and back it up with research so that we can keep doing it and keep doing it. And hopefully, as we move forward, TDM continues to grow, and this is just the start of that. So, you know, we like to keep these podcasts short, and there's a lot here to more through TDM, and obviously TDM in general. But I think this is a really good overview of what this act would do. Now, this act hasn't been passed; it's been introduced. Is that right? It's been introduced in
Correct.
the House.
Yes.
And so, what does it mean? I'm a listener here. I want to figure out how can I actually help make this actually exist? What can I do to help kind of push through this through the act and actually make it a law?
Sure. So we're doing a couple things. In order to help, you can contact your local representative, so your member of Congress, whoever that may be, and basically explain to them and tell your story about why your commute matters, what you do, why does it matter, from the environment, from an equity standpoint to you. We were able to get TDM in the House Select Climate Report, so that was a big accomplishment last year. So
Yeah.
building on that, and so share what you're doing, contact that representative. And some people work for companies and they're like, well, I'm not allowed to advocate. So, okay, so what we're asking to do is we have a TDM week, share that story. What are you doing? How do you measure your programs if you're doing programs? If you're just a person that, works at a company and rides their bike every day, contact your local representative and say, hey, this act would help further my commute and the way I like to commute and further enhance the planet and everything else that goes with it.
And so, for our listeners here and people watching us on our video, we've by the time you see this, it's going to be next week is TDM week, and you can find more information about that. We'll put the links and information in our post on our site. But you also find more information at the ACT website. I'm assuming
Yes.
actweb.org. And I think that's a good idea. Really, just kind of get your story out there. I reached out and contacted a couple members of Congress, my personal representative, and then I also worked with my boss to help send something out to his representative, and just saying, this is why TDM is important to us, and this is the kind of stuff we're working on. And the benefit we see and why we think this particular act more through TDM is going to cause a lot of give a lot of benefit back to the state, and obviously to the country as well. But even if you can't do that, you don't feel comfortable doing that, that's where TDM week is for. You can just post on social media. You can kind of just get the word out there that TDM is important, and then the more people see that, the more our representatives are going to want to jump on board of this act. Well, I mean, I think I'm really excited. I think the More Through TDM Act has a lot of potential here. Obviously, TDM, this is what we talk about on the show. TDM is a key solution moving forward to helping save the environment, save our planet, but also, as we talked about with other guests, and we'll keep talking about throughout the show, it helps save money. It helps save people time. It's better health. There's so many benefits here. And the More Through TDM Act is finally something here that can help us funnel money into these programs, help us better standardize these programs. I'm really excited about it. That's in my words. I want to throw it over to you. You've been working on this with folks in Washington. Can you just summarize this for everyone? Why is the More Through TDM Act going to save the planet? Why is it so important?
One of the interesting aspects of the pandemic is that everybody's behavior was changed. So we have that once in a century, once in a generation opportunity to do a reset. We know things haven't been working with the planet. We know things haven't been working with sustainability and climate. So this is our chance to take a piece of legislation, and it offers everyone a choice. So whether you live in a rural community or an urban community or a suburban community, it doesn't matter. All it is saying, hey, you got to see if you couldn't walk to your grocery store during this time, or you wanted to take the trails, but you didn't have a connection, or you wanted to use the latest technology, but it wasn't synced, or your transit agency didn't have the coolest tech. There's all these things. So it's about choices, it's about equity. And we really feel that, by doing that and encouraging people to do all these alternative modes, you're going to save this planet, because commuting is the number one source emission. So if we can lower that, it's a massive game changer, and we can really have the planet that we want and enjoy it for many generations to come.
Yeah, that was well said. This is why we have you on, Rob.
Thank you.
Expert in TDM. I always like talking with you, and I think, if you're listening to this, take some time, think about why TDM is important to you. And next week during TDM week, make a post, talk to a member of Congress, just start getting the word out, because I think you put it really well, Rob. So that's it for our the main part of our episode. Like we always do every week, we end off with a little bit of fun. Just in case you haven't quite made it to work and you want to listen to some music, we've got a nice playlist on Spotify of all the favorite songs from our guests. So, Rob, we'd love to have you add a song or more to our playlist. What are you listening to? What do you want to add on there?
I would add 2. Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin. Wakes me up.
Nice.
Gets me going. And then same thing, Rearview Mirror from Pearl Jam. You think about just going, and that can be a bike mirror, a transit mirror, any type of mirror. It doesn't have to be a car mirror. I just like songs that, just start the day and just jump into it and be ready. Perfect.
I like it. Yeah, both those songs are great. And yeah, they get you pumped up for the day. I think that's good. All right. Well, Rob, thanks for being on today with us. As always, everyone, check out our website, betweenthelines.io, to learn more, to subscribe, and share this with everyone. We like getting the word out there about TDM, and particularly this episode, more through TDM. Share it with all your friends to learn more about this important act. Rob, thanks for being on today.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of Between the Lines with Andy Keaton. Be sure to subscribe to hear next week's episode, and check out our exclusive commuter playlists on Spotify.